What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Timeless Movie Podcast, episode number 106. My name is Victor Vasquez. Appreciate you joining me on another movie discussion where we talk about a new movie that we got to check out in theaters, streaming. We talk about it, we give our pros and cons, maybe give some favorite moments or performances. I'll even recommend whether you should check this out in theaters or wait for streaming. But more importantly, at the end of this podcast, I give you my thoughts on whether the film is timeless. Is it something that I would want to rewatch over and over and over again and add it to my movie collection? Before we jump into this week's episode and this week's movie, I did want to call out that there's a couple of episodes that I was able to release over the break. So if you have a chance, go ahead and listen it on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. I ended up inviting my brother Omar Vasquez to talk to me about the top 10 movies of 2024. We also went through our made up timeless movie awards. It was really fun. So if you have a chance, go check it out on all platforms. Let me know in the comments and the reviews of those episodes if you like them and what you would want to hear more of as well. On this week's episode, though, I actually have a separate guest. I'm super excited to be talking to him. I've talked to him about movies various different times. We've exchanged a lot of ideas. So I thought this was the perfect movie to actually talk to him and invite him on the Timeless Movie Podcast. He is a amateur MMA fighter. He trains in jiu-jitsu. He's a DJ. This guy's a jack of all trades, and he's one of my best friends. I have Ryan Saul joining me on the podcast. What's up, Ryan? How's it going, dude?
Hey, thanks for having me, man. Really appreciate it.
Dude, I always like to hype you up, dude, because you feel like you're one of my most talented friends of all the things that you do. So I had to hype you up on the MMA stuff, on the jujitsu stuff. Now it's gonna be movie stuff, dude. I mean, you and I have talked about movies for a while, and there was one movie that you had told me about when we were, going on break, and you're like, Vic, you got to watch one movie, and the movie is The Substance. So that's the movie that we're gonna be talking about today. So super excited, Ryan, to be talking to you about that, kind of discussing some of our thoughts. Before we jump into it, though, I did want to kind of give the folks that are listening a kind of an idea as to what Ryan and I's thoughts are on a little bit of horror movies and body horror, because that's really what The Substance is about. Again, it involves some very interesting types of topics in the movie. So, Ryan, I'll kind of kick it off to you, man. When it comes to horror and body horror, do you enjoy that kind of a genre? Like, what are your kind of thoughts when you think about those movies?
Yeah, man. Definitely enjoy the horror genre. I'm a big fan of horror films, and I just want to caveat first and level set with everyone. I'm not an expert in horror films, nor am I a super fan or anything like that. But I do enjoy watching a lot of the big horror films that do come out. Anything by Blumhouse is generally pretty good and gets me excited. There's something like very captivating to me about like what if scenarios and seeing kind of the supernatural because I'm very curious minded and so I think that's why it kind of captures my attention. I wouldn't say like body horror is at the top of my favorite subgenres, but there are some pretty very good ones that I like that are on the top of my list, like Get Out by Jordan Peele, that I really enjoyed, and this one as well, which we'll talk about.
Yeah, dude, and I'm similar. I've kind of stayed away from as many horrors like that for some reason. Like again, it's just never been something that I've always kind of gravitated towards. I always prefer action. I prefer other types of films that just kind of captivate my mind, kind of like escaping a little bit of the reality. So those are kind of movies that I always tend to want to watch. It wasn't until really this podcast, Ryan, where I started kind of at least opening my mind a little bit more to horror. And I'm like, okay, well, I got to give it a shot. I want to at least review a couple of these. And I was really surprised with some of the movies that I was able to see in 2024 around horror. One of those being kind of like Long Legs, even Smile 2. So Smile was one that Ryan had recommended to me, and I really enjoyed that one. So yeah, I've opened up my mind a little bit more. I've tried to at least give these a little bit more of a shot. I've just noticed that more horror movies at least have better stories now. I always felt like they were cheesy. I don't know if you feel that same kind of sentiment, Ryan, but I've always had like this feeling of like the stories of horror movies just not really living up to what I'm expecting them to be.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree, man. I mean, I think there's a lot of horror movie tropes that are very common in the industry, and I think a lot of the super fans of horror films, will watch some of those like B-rated films. I'm not one of those people. I want to see the best of the best, and I want to see what's like unique and out there, and
Yeah.
something that I haven't seen before. And I think the Substance definitely fits that bill, along with those others that we talked about and I recommended, like Smile. which is also a very good film.
Well, I love it, man. I think this is a great transition, Ryan. You talked about it, right? The Substance. This is the movie that you recommended to me. Me and Ryan have not talked about this movie. We've only basically just set up this conversation so that we can kind of give our thoughts on this podcast recording. So, Ryan, if you're ready for it, man, I'm ready to kind of dive into some of our non-spoiler thoughts about watching The Substance. I'll kick it off first, and then I'll kind of, let you kind of dive in and see if you have any kind of maybe thoughts that we are either are differ on, or you have maybe very similar thoughts. So I'll jump right in. I got to see The Substance over the break. I again didn't really know what to expect. I had read a little bit about what the movie was going to entail, and after I watched the movie, I got to say that I thought The Substance was really good. I was really surprised at how much I enjoyed this movie. Again, not big into horror, but as soon as I saw the tagline that they were kind of describing in The Substance, as soon as I heard, Ryan, like when it says, "Do you want to be a better version of yourself?" And then they started kind of like showing this ad of a drug that would make you a better you. I was like, okay, I'm hooked. I'm in. Like, I want to know, what does this drug do? What's going to be the side effects? There's going to be something terrible that's going to happen to the main character. So I was all in, man. I really enjoyed that whole kind of setup. And I think when the premise is of a movie is like just kind of hooks you, it kept me engaged throughout the movie. Apart from the very intriguing story, I gotta say that there's also really great characters and very unique characters in the movie. You have characters, that are played by Demi Moore, Margaret Qualley, Dennis Quaid. Each of those characters like plays such a very like unique type of a person. Some are very exaggerated. Some are playing it very real. But again, I feel like that helped me just be attached to these characters a lot more. And it just, again, overall made me very interested as to what was going to happen every step of the way. Overall, though, I also got to say that one of my other kind of favorite things about the movie was the uneasy feeling. It gives me like this very, like, as I'm watching it, I'm like, okay, I know something is going to happen to this character. And I don't know, and I don't really want to see what's going to happen, but I couldn't keep my eyes away from the screen. So that was something that I really enjoyed. And I love it when a movie can make me feel that kind of an uneasy feeling where I kind of want to turn away, but I also want to keep watching because, again, I want to be surprised about what's going to show up. Now, that does lead me into saying that because of the wacky things that start happening in this movie, there are things that kind of take me out of it. I'll talk a little bit about that with the cons with you, Ryan, but those are kind of my overall thoughts. I enjoyed it. It's a fun ride. I love the experience. What about you, Ryan? I'll pass it off to you. Do we agree on some of the things? What are your non-spoiler thoughts of The Substance?
Yeah, dude, I'm 100% with you with pretty much everything that you said about the movie. And I'll just say that, how I found out about the movie was actually through my wife, who you know very well, who didn't initially like horror films until we had met, and I kind of forced her to watch a couple. And she ended up becoming a huge fan and really enjoyed watching horror films, and that's something that we kind of shared together. So that's another reason why we always tend to watch some of the bigger ones. Specifically with The Substance, she saw the I think it was on TikTok or something, someone talking about the movie and how it just came out, and then we decided to watch it, and I was not disappointed, man. I was very pleasantly surprised, and I think you captured it pretty perfectly. Where we watched the trailer for it, and the one thing that was really captivating was this idea of returning to like a younger version of yourself,
Hmm.
and that is the exact like what if scenario that I look for when I watch movies, because I want to see what happens. It's not something that can actually happen in real life, but like what is where can this movie go, and I was just excited for the ride. When I did watch the movie, I was not disappointed with how it delivered. To your point, everything from like the cinematography to the actors and the actresses that played in it, I think they all did a phenomenal job. We can talk more about that like once we get into the pros and cons, but overall, it was well acted. They had some some new faces and some older faces on the cast. Yeah, I mean, I think overall, definitely feel like there were some moments of the movie that also kind of took me out of it, which I'll explain once we get more into the cons. There are some things that I wish it would that would be different, and all that to say, like it was a great experience watching it, but there are some things that I wish or I think could have been better to make it like a perfect movie.
Oh, I can't wait to get to that, man. I really want to know like what were those parts that you'd want to probably change or at least kind of see to make it a little bit better. So love that we're like on the same page. Let me kind of go into Ryan. Like I'll go into like a little synopsis for folks that have not seen the substance, kind of give you an idea, a little bit of a setup. Again, I'm not going to spoil too much about it, but hopefully what me and Ryan kind of described is kind of like a general sense and ambiance of what this movie's about. Again, it's wacky, but it kind of follows the story of a character named Elizabeth Sparkles. She is a well known actress in this universe. She is now on a fitness show, and it's played by Demi Moore. Elizabeth Sparkle kind of goes through, and she's having this kind of fitness show, but then eventually she finds out that due to her age, her looks, and due to what executives are looking for now, they're actually going to fire her. And you kind of set up the theme of almost like people getting it to a certain age and you just don't have what you used to have, right? And so that's exactly what they kind of portray in the film. They start looking for a younger actress or somebody that can, looks a lot more beautiful than Elizabeth Sparkles. And because of this, she's such an, in a daze of the news. She doesn't know what she's going to do with her life. She actually gets into a car accident and then goes to the hospital. And in this hospital, there's a nurse that ends up giving her a number to this place called the Substance. And that's where this wild ride begins, where again, she gets put in a position where she's hitting a wall in her career. She's already getting up there in age, and she has no other choice but to call this number on the Substance in order to, again, become a better version of herself. And then a bunch of crazy stuff starts happening as she injects this drug inside of her. So I'll leave it at that. That's just a very simple synopsis. I'm pretty sure I'm leaving a lot of gaps in there, but again, hopefully that premise enough gets you excited to kind of want to watch this movie as well. Ryan, before we kind of move into more of the spoiler territory, if I could ask you from your perspective, would this be a movie now that you've watched it? Is this something that you would recommend to friends, to other people to watch? Are there any caveats that you would probably give to folks, if they wanted to watch this movie in streaming?
Yeah, I mean, the quick answer to that is absolutely. I would recommend this movie to anyone who's into horror films, but even if you're not into horror films, I think there's definitely something very relatable in the overall theme of the movie, which we'll talk about in just a little bit. That everyone can sort of relate to. Like the main character is going through a sort of like midlife crisis where they aren't who they used to be, and society is giving them a lot of pressure to, or giving more attention rather, to people who are maybe younger, more pretty, more intelligent in the industry. And that's something that I think everyone can sort of relate to. So I would definitely recommend this to folks. The only exception probably being if you if you cannot handle extreme body horror, because I think there are definitely some scenes in here that, yeah, might make some people uneasy or uncomfortable.
Yeah, you hit it right on the head, Ryan. That's exactly what I was going to say. That's my big caveat is I would 100% recommend this to folks. And like you said, you don't have to be a huge horror fan. There's already kind of very cool concepts that just immediately keep you engaged. But I feel like if you're not good with people cutting themselves in some way, this very unique type of body horror, then I think this might be a no for you guys. But again, if you're comfortable with that, if that doesn't gross you out, then this is a definitely recommend from me, and it sounds like from Ryan as well. So guys, those are again non-spoiler thoughts about the substance. Hopefully that kind of gives you a good idea if you were on the fence before checking it out. Hopefully this kind of pushes you in that right direction if you want to check it out or not. Ryan, I think this is a great opportunity, man. Let's use this as a jumping off point. We've not spoiled anything, so now let's go into spoilers, man. Let's talk pros, cons. I want to really dissect this movie with you and really know what you liked about it and what you didn't like about it. So now that, again, we're in the spoiler section, so if you haven't seen it, again, jump out of the video, come back when you've seen it. That way you can hear Ryan and I's thoughts on it fully. Ryan, I'll pass it over to you, man. You're the guest. Tell me one of your first pros that you really enjoyed about the substance.
Yeah, I'll start with a real easy one. For me, I really appreciated the cinematography, and I think it was on point. I like how they used consistent shots to really highlight the slow progression of both characters, like Elizabeth and Sue.
Mm-hmm.
I think those scenes were very powerful because you had transition points where you were able to compare like how Elizabeth was during the beginning of the film and towards the middle when she was going through that sort of transition, all the way up to the end. And same thing with Sue. When she came in in sort of like the later half of the beginning of the film until the end of the film as well. So I really liked the cinematography. I thought it was great. I like the shots that they used, especially when they showed scenes of like both of the characters on at the same time. And when I say that, I mean like either Elizabeth would be, in the apartment and she would be looking at a poster of the young version of Sue and the kind of reflecting on that, or whether it was like Sue also looking at like an old portrait of Elizabeth. I think those scenes were super powerful, very good scenes to like deliver the message that the movie was trying to go for. What did you think?
Yeah, dude, great call, Ryan. That's actually my third pro. Was I kind of phrased it in a different way, but kind of the same idea that you had, which is I love the parallels that they had between Elizabeth and Sue. Where I don't know if you noticed, but like sometimes when Elizabeth would be walking down the street, she would walk from like right to left, like on the screen. But then when it would be Sue's turn to take over. Sue would walk the opposite way. She'd walk from left to
Ooh,
right on the screen, and
I
so
didn't catch that.
yeah, so like
Yeah.
I really enjoyed like how they would do that parallels. And then I also kind of wanted to call out kind of very similar. I don't know if you noticed the music. Like the music for Sue was always upbeat because she's younger, she's
Right.
she's in the prime of her career. And then for like Elizabeth, it was always kind of like not sad, but almost like a very just muted. It
Somber
wasn't as
tones.
exciting.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So I really like that, dude. When they paralleled both characters, and like you said, when they would switch off or sometimes both be in the same shot, it made the message very clear, like that. Like, hey, look, these are the differences between the two lives. Who's actually enjoying what? So I really enjoyed that.
Yeah. 100% agree. What's another one on your list, man?
Another one that I got, dude, is again very similar to cinematography. But did you notice like the camera, like the way that they would position some of the cameras? Like there was this character named Harvey who's like the executive. There was a shot, dude, where at the beginning of the movie he comes to the restroom and he's like using the urinal, and the camera is like stuck to like it's almost like it's stuck to the wall of the urinal that he's using. Those shots, dude, just felt so weird and so awkward, but it worked. Like there was various shots like that where again he comes up to the urinal and you're like looking at his face. I don't know if you remember when he's eating at the restaurant and like
Yep.
you're seeing him eat the shrimp and it feels so
It's
wrong. And
grotesque.
yeah, dude, exactly.
Yeah.
And like that's another thing where like that's not really body horror, but it's a different type of like a visual, like a visual that you're not really comfortable with. Like seeing somebody just awkwardly eat shrimp and like eat it in that way is like, oh man, it's nuts.
Yeah, dude. I was actually gonna point that out too, because I think they really sold his character of being, this kind of hotshot Hollywood executive and all the tropes that come along with that. And that shrimp scene is ingrained in my head because it's one of my pet peeves. And to have that in a movie where it was like everything's in HD and you're like fully zoomed into his mouth and all whatnot, like it was to me is a foreshadowing of the grotesqueness to come later in the movie.
Yeah.
But it was interesting. It was an interesting way to I guess like butter up the audience for what's to come.
Dude, great call, dude. That's a great way to articulate like that, like a foreshadowing of like, hey, this is just the beginning, you know? Well, we got to warm you up somehow.
Yeah.
Dude, if I can just say one more thing on the cinematography piece, one other thing that I really liked was, and I think you may have called it out, like in the way that they did the camera work. Do you remember when Sue would run out of the stabilizer and like the whole room would start blurring, and like it looked like she was gonna like pass out in some way? I don't know, something about that camera, like when it would start shaking and it would show like her like almost like fainting and falling off, like that to me like looks super cool. Like they made the audience also feel like, oh crap, like it looks super, like you're getting dizzy just watching her
Yeah.
like just try to not stumble and not fall and find stabilizer to control herself.
Yeah, yeah, it's almost like you're experiencing the same symptoms like in first person, what she may be going through at that time, and I think that's yeah, it's genius, man.
Yeah, but that was all I got from the cinematography piece. Ryan, what about you? Any other pros that you have on your list?
Yeah, I touched on this a little bit earlier. I think the theme of the overall movie,
Hmm.
and kind of that theme of like struggling with aging just in general, right? And having a mid or quarter life crisis and wanting to go back to your earlier days is very relatable. I think it's something that everyone at one point or another may experience it in their lives. Many people will experience it multiple times in their lives as you age. If you're me, you experience it every year on your birthday, um, where you just think, man, I'm one more year closer to the end. Uh, no, I'm just kidding. Not to
Don't
be
tell me
that
that, Ryan.
morbid,
Don't tell me
but
that.
but you know what I mean. Like,
Yeah.
as you age, I think your mortality comes more into question, and you start thinking about like what you've achieved or not accomplished or achieved in life, and that piece is super relatable, and that plus like that feeling is compounded even more by the fact that like everyone around her and society is telling her that she's not good enough anymore and she isn't what she used to be, and
Hmm.
there are new up and comers that are uh, swiping her jobs and whatnot. Like that's also super relatable for the average person, I think, and that's why I think that a lot of people would enjoy this movie just because like you're able to kind of relate to that main character, and the pursuit of just maintaining your youth doesn't come without consequences in any scenario, and nobody can escape the end, death. So I think that was an extremely powerful message, and kind of the broader theme that I got out of it. And curious to know what you thought about that, man.
Yeah, dude. Well said, man. Well said, Ryan. That's a great way to articulate it. And yeah, I got the same kind of message in regards to just like how tough it is going to get, like when you do have these types of midlife or quarter life crisis, right? Like where at one point, not that you take it for granted, right? But like when you're young, you don't think about those kind of things, right? You don't think about
Right.
like death in that kind of way. You're thinking of like, well, what am I going to do next, right? Like when am I going to do this, or when am I going to do this? And eventually, you're going to hit a point where you're like, oh man, I'm not as fast, or I can't think as quick, or I can't do this. And so, dude,
Exactly.
it's yeah. That's why I feel like again, this film is very. It kind of is for like everybody in a way, right? Even if you're not going through like a midlife crisis, or even if you're not like struggling with that kind of concept, right? Even if you're young, like you could just giving you that concept of like, well, eventually you're gonna hit that point, right? Father time comes for everybody, and so, yeah, dude, it's scary like that, but again, it's something that's good. I mean, you and I have talked about those kind of concepts too, right? Of like how we kind of view the world, and like you mentioned about your birthday, like I mentioned more about like how small we are in the universe, right? And like how everybody kind
Yeah.
of puts their own perspectives on it. But again, I think the message in this one is super relatable to everybody, no matter what age you are. And I think again that's why it's definitely a recommend for me. But yeah, man, I can't say it better than how you've articulated, Ryan. It's a great call out, and again, I think it's what makes this not only a really good movie, but a lot of folks that have made this their favorite movie of 2024 too. It's just awesome, man.
Yeah, and it's unique. I mean, it's not unique in the sense that this theme hasn't really been explored before in other movies, but to do so in a horror film, I think is pretty unique because I can't think of a horror film, recently that's done something like this. I guess maybe you could consider like Get Out a form of that. Not to like spoil another movie. I
Yeah.
won't spoil the ending, but if you've watched the movie before, you kind of know what we're talking about. But yeah, man, I think again super relatable and something that none of us can escape, and I think the movie does a really good job of telling that story, and the consequences of chasing chasing the dragon or chasing your fountain of youth.
Dude, I love it, man. That's a great pro, dude. I'm glad that you articulated it, because I would not have, I would have butchered like any kind of thought of the theme of that in that kind of way. So Ryan, this is why I got you on the podcast, man. This is why I needed you here to talk about this. Um, Ryan, I got one other pro for you on my side. I really enjoyed the concept of just like the substance drug. When you told me about this movie, I thought that like when they took the drug and they injected it, I thought that they themselves, like I thought Elizabeth was just gonna turn into like just a younger version. I wasn't expecting what I was gonna see, which is like an
Mm,
entirely different copy of you, just younger, coming out of your spine.
right.
I don't think I was ready for that. But what I loved about it though is I love that it was all like procedural. Like, oh, here's the steps. You gotta feed your old body. You have to do this every single day. You have to take stabilizer from their spine and inject it to yourself every day. So everything from like the procedural and the steps, and like, hey, every clone or every copy can only have the body for 7 days, and then you got to switch. Something about like this whole thing that was planned out about using this drug like it kind of just, I don't know, I enjoyed it. Like it was like, oh, okay, everything is kind of like answered. Like, okay, what happens if somebody passes the seventh day, and then they start
Yeah.
explaining that in the movie. I'm like, okay, well, there's consequences, right, for trying to be too greedy with the time. So I don't know, dude. Something about that whole concept and how they kind of visualized and showed that there's actual steps to it, and like everything is deliberate. Really, how delicate the balance has to be. Where like, the older version, like Elizabeth, has to balance it out with Sue, but how do you control like both sides, right? Because I was thinking again, my expectations beforehand was I thought that the younger version was going to have the same memories and the same thoughts, but it seems like they have their own kind of thoughts and their own kind of conscience in that kind of a space. So I don't know, dude. The whole concept of the substance and the drug and how they planned it out and how they described all these steps, I really enjoyed that because I started questioning as I was watching. And then they started kind of ticking off all those notes of the checklist, like, oh, okay, that makes sense. That makes sense. So I don't know if my whole rambling made sense on that pro, Ryan, but that's kind of what I really enjoyed about the one of the parts of the substance.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I One thing that you called out that I think is really important, and also another theme of the movie is having balance. And although there were very clear instructions on what Elizabeth should be doing, even just like the way that they presented it too, is that she had to call someone, and she didn't know who this person on the other side of the other end of the phone is, and she had to go into this like random warehouse, and she never interacts with anyone like of the employees there, and she's just like literally just going to a locker as she's instructed to do, super compliant because it's something that she wants. And and then she goes home and she does a procedure, and then whenever she needs support, just like you and I, we get called in our day-to-day jobs. She calls support. I thought that was pretty interesting because you could have presented that in a different way, where maybe there was like a very well polished like office building and a very reputable company that has this particular drug, right? And basically send a very similar message, but it did leave this sort of mystery and this sort of vibe of like there's something not 100% okay with the way that this is being done.
Mm-hmm. Again, it just gives you that uneasy feeling again, right? Like where you never see Elizabeth interact with anybody. You never see her kind of actually get like a sometimes true answers. It's just they just kept telling her balance, balance, balance. And so it's
Yep.
like, oh man, it's nuts, dude. Oh, one other thing that made me think about like when you were describing it about themes too is I also think it's like a theme of not only like balance and not only about like facing like your own life and kind of understanding like that you're gonna have to go through this period that you might have a midlife crisis. There's also the theme, dude, that I got was from Sue's perspective, which is pushing the limits of your curiosity, right? You're always so curious
Mm,
about like, oh, I can only if I can just do this a little bit more. And like Sue wanted more time. Like for her, 7 days wasn't sufficient. Like she wanted more time. And that's like how I feel like, at least me, Ryan, I feel like all humans are like that, right? We're all curious to like when we get a taste of something, we're like, oh well, well, what's the line, right? Like, where can I
yeah.
go? What's the limit of this? And that's kind of what I got from Sue too when I was like watching the movie. Is like, as soon as she gets more and more famous and she gets booked for more and more projects, she just like, well, 7 days isn't sufficient. So she even at one point I think is taking the body for like months, and so it's like,
Yeah.
oh man, it's crazy, dude. But that's again another thing that I caught on to it as well.
No, for sure. Definitely from Sue's perspective, there's a greed aspect on both sides, right? From Elizabeth's side of wanting to do this in the first place and wanting to explore this opportunity, and then seemingly they're the same person. But that actually kind of leads me to, and it's a good segue to my biggest con, I would say, in the movie, if we're okay to move to that.
Let's do it.
I think the entire movie is really like a constant battle of Elizabeth with seemingly herself, but and this is like even prior to the DNA split, right? Like she just wasn't happy with the current self, and she wasn't coming to the realization that she's now older, and maybe she should kind of accept that and pivot her career or find something else. There is kind of one logical loophole that I wanted an answer to that I didn't quite get in the beginning of the movie. After she takes the substance, Sue is presented like as a younger version of Elizabeth, and it seems like they're the same person, right? She looks at herself in the mirror and she's like, oh, this is great, like I'm in a younger version of my body and whatnot. As the movie progressed, it almost seemed like they started to diverge into like different people
Mm-hmm.
battling against each other for control of their own existence. And like if it is the same person, you're using different vessels in your body. And if we were to break this down, then it's almost like the consciousness is the only one that's moving, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the consciousness, despite the bodies being tethered together some way by like DNA or whatnot, is their consciousness also bound to that? And do their consciousness also split? That's a question that I wasn't quite sure got answered, or I felt like it was a logical loophole, but I wanted to get your thoughts on that, man.
Yeah, dude, that's a great call, and that's again when I went into watching the movie, I was thinking that it was just going to be like the same person, right? Like I just thought that she was going to get younger. To me, how I interpreted the movie is that I felt like Elizabeth was always the main conscious, and Sue was just like I think you called it out earlier. I think just a piece of her, but not a full conscience, right? Like because she didn't have the same memories, like she didn't have the same kind of quirks or things that like Elizabeth would have. So yeah, to me, I think like you mentioned, there might be that loophole. To me, I understood it as Elizabeth was always the one. She's the actual conscience of where this is all stemming from, and Sue's just a piece. Like she's not a full like 100%. That's how I guess I interpret it. Ryan, is that I'm thinking Elizabeth is always the one with the main conscience, and Sue is just again some type of like a small sliver of the conscience. Like she knows things here and there, and she might have like these same tendencies as Elizabeth, but it's not like fully her, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, no, that does make sense. I think what was yeah, it was still confusing the way that their personalities kind of diverged and the way that they were kind of fighting for additional time to be conscious, right? Effectively, that's what they're doing is fighting for consciousness. And if you're the same person, I mean, it does beg the question: like, is it the same person, or are they now like different people?
Yeah, by the end, I was thinking that they were different people. Like
Right.
that's kind of like because again, Sue started acting in like in a much more different, more aggressive way, right? Because again, she wanted to get greedy with the time. So yeah, that's kind of how I read it. But yeah, I'm really curious like that if I can find something or like something where like the director will say like something very particular. But you're right, like in the movie, maybe they didn't draw the line enough to kind of describe like, well, what are they battling? The consciousness or like what is it specifically that differentiates them? Or are they different people altogether? So
Yeah, and I know we're getting a little philosophical
yeah,
here. Maybe it's a percentage of consciousness,
yeah,
that
exactly.
develops into its own consciousness. Like it's that part was what's confusing to me. You and I talked about like some philosophy stuff here and there, and I think what came to mind for me was the ship of Theseus. Have you heard of that theory?
I have
And I'm
not,
not
dude.
yeah,
Describe
I'm
it,
not
bro.
trying to derail the conversation here, but I'll just describe it very, very briefly. But the ship of Theseus is this philosophy that the ship is used throughout the years. As the ship is going on these expeditions and coming back, the ship is getting older. There are parts that need to be replaced of that ship. And at one point, the parts of the ship are no longer the original because all of the original parts have been replaced by newer parts. So at that point, is the ship of Theseus still the ship of Theseus, or is it something else? And I think that is it's kind of like in alignment with what we were talking about consciousness, because consciousness is effectively like what we would consider ourselves, right? And the heart and the spirit of whatever, like in this case the ship of Theseus. So even if we're like in this movie, Elizabeth's body is like, kind of deformed, and Sue comes out of Elizabeth's body, which, is super strange to even begin with. Does the consciousness also transfer? And by taking that shot, like how much of it gets transferred? And I think that's what I was constantly thinking about, and why I was battling, like why are they fighting for their existence if it's the same person? And yeah, I was just curious, man, what you thought about that, Vic.
Yeah, dude, and as you started explaining that the ship of Theseus example, now I remember when you're I remember you threw that question at me, which like, hey, if I remove every single piece of this ship and leave only one piece, or like eventually exchange it, but it's essentially the same ship. Like, is it
Yep.
really the same ship like that, or are we talking about a new ship altogether, dude? I think this is this is a great example to kind of compare to that movie, right? Which is in the substance again. They set it up as if it is the same person, but by the end of the movie, again, I'm going back to it.
Right.
They're two different people. My initial thought was like, well, why are you fighting, right? Like if you are the same person, and they kept saying it whenever she called the substance phone number,
Yep.
like you are one, like, but it never felt like they were one, right? They felt like they were two separate entities, like just having to share time. And that's why again, as soon as it ended, I was like, no, well, she never had the same dreams. They never had the same kind of thoughts. Again, I think the only thing that they had similar was specific looks or little ticks. Like whenever they would blow the kiss to the camera, that was like the only kind of tendency that I saw. Like, okay, these people are similar in that way. But other than that, I feel like they had completely different types of mindsets and were different people. So that's at least how I interpret it. Maybe we're wrong. I don't know in how we're thinking of it, but that's kind of how I see it.
That's how I saw it as well. And again, I'm not a horror movie expert or whatnot. I'm just the layman's view. But I'm in agreement with you, man.
Well, dude, that's a great con, dude. I like that one. Can I tell you one of mine?
Absolutely, please do.
One of my cons that took me out of the movie was in the third act, Ryan, when you're no longer with Elizabeth, you're no longer with Sue. Now you're with this monster called Monster Elizabeth Sue or something like that. They combine their names. Um, there's a specific scene where she goes to a New Year's Eve party because Sue was intended to perform at this New Year's Eve party in front of a big set of group and it was going to be televised. Well, in this scene, they have this monster show up and eventually something happens, Ryan, where it starts spitting blood out of everybody in the whole crowd. Now the scene itself, it doesn't gross me out. That's not why it's a con. To me it's a con because I don't know, it felt like so it felt so wacky and so like dreamy, like a dream sequence,
Yeah.
that it didn't feel like it vibed with the same part of the movie that I was watching at the beginning. Like at the beginning, I was so engaged, like, okay, like yeah, like let's see what happens when she gets younger. Okay, then oh, they're starting to fight. Now she's starting to turn into this very old and like nasty lady, and all this stuff starts happening, and I'm invested. And then this scene happens, and I don't know, it kind of took me out. Like it was like a montage. It didn't feel real. I couldn't tell if people knew that she was a monster because I don't know if you remember, but when they let her into the studio, like the guy that's like security doesn't even pay
Yep.
attention that she looks hideous and like has a mask on. I'm like,
Right.
what is this? And so I was pretty confused at that piece of it. And so yeah, like that was like really my biggest con and really my only con is I don't know what they were trying to achieve with that. Like I don't know if that was like inspired by another horror movie. Like I just didn't know what the intent of it was. It eventually ends on a on a note that I at least liked, like the actual ending of the movie. I kind of liked, but that whole sequence of this big monster just spitting out blood at the whole crowd, like I just didn't get it. What do you feel about that, Ryan?
Dude, that was gonna be my my other con as well. It's somewhat like the last act of the film. I also didn't understand that either because I think what held you together, and you're probably the same way. What kept me invested was seeing what would happen in kind of a somewhat realistic-ish scenario, and then logic kind of all went out the window. The moments, and you pointed out the exact moment where I thought this. The moment when she put on the paper mask of Sue
Yep.
right over the monster, and she went to the back trailer or back end trailer or whatever, and
Hmm.
then the employee didn't even say anything. And I was like, are you for real? Like, you see the way she looks like, I'm pretty sure someone would have had questions, right? And then yeah, I mean, you said it perfectly, man. And things started to get a little wacky where she was walking down the hallway, and then Harvey, yeah, was coming down with like the other stakeholders or big shot executives, and he was telling her to smile, and didn't even say a peep. And at that point, I was like, yeah, is this a dream? Like, it is kind of odd to end the movie this way. And then she got on stage, and the whole thing happened where she actually somewhat performed, and the whole blood thing. Like I'm with you, dude. Like I didn't get it. I do see how some people may appreciate maybe the artistic aspect of like how things escalated in the movie.
Hmm.
And I don't know how much more you can crescendo after just turning into a giant blob of human body parts, you know what I mean? um but yeah, it was intense, man. And I don't understand the message, I guess, that they were trying to deliver with that. So I'm with you. Maybe there's some smarter critics out there that have the answers to that. Maybe I need to watch more of those. But for me, I also did not get it.
Yeah, yeah, dude. I don't. Again, you might be right. Like again, I was thinking of like, okay, is there a movie like in the past that maybe had used something very similar? And again, maybe the director wanted to pull inspiration for like showing this blood kind of splatter over everybody in the crowd. Like there has to be some type of like meaning because again, like everything up to that point, like the theme just hits. Everything makes sense. Everything that they're going through, like it's like you mentioned, it's logical at least to an extent. But yeah, like something about that, like it took me out of the experience, and it sucks because like I was having a great time. I was in like the body horror stuff, like didn't freak me out as much. I was like everything about it, like even I'll say this to kind of maybe flip it a little bit on a more positive note. I really like the design of the monster though. Like, dude, it really creeped me out when you could see Demi Moore's face like on the back, like, and her mouth is just open, like, and she just makes this weird ass noise, like. Uh, and it's like, oh my goodness, dude, that was creepy. And I was like,
Yeah,
okay,
it
so
was.
what are they gonna do? And then they kind of go into this whole blood scene. I was like, oh, okay, well, all right, I guess.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's like, you're trying to finish off the movie. I was like, all right, I guess I'm with it.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, but I agree. That monster design was seriously grotesque. Like, I can't think of another movie. I mean, it was giving me like human centipede vibes,
yeah,
like it was a sight to behold. And hey, props to the makeup and design artists
yes.
for that, because that was kind of exactly what you would probably picture if something were to go AWOL, and that's like worst case scenario. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Exactly, dude. Well, so again, maybe if we ever have a chance to talk to the director Coralie Farge, like that, maybe I'll ask her like that to let her know like what was the inspiration of this scene like that. What specifically was your motivation to kind of include this blood scene like that over the crowd? So, Ryan, any other cons on your side in regards to the substance?
No other cons. I know we spent a lot of time in the cons area, making it seem like I didn't enjoy the movie, but I thoroughly enjoyed the movie. So just want to say that I think the pros definitely outweighed the cons. I think what I was my cons of kind of the logical gaps or loopholes was more of a nitpick more than anything. But it's that's what movies are for. It's to get you to think about things, and I was thoroughly entertained thinking about it. So
Exactly. Dude, yeah, great way to explain it. And I think this is a good way, right? Like we talked a little bit about our cons. Let's come back to some positive stuff, dude. Let's transition into some of our favorite things about the movie. So we'll talk a little bit about our favorite performance, our favorite scene, and our favorite shot. Ryan, you're the guest man. I want you to kick this off for us. If we start with favorite performance, is there who is your favorite performance, favorite actor in this movie?
ooh,
If you had to choose
man.
one.
Yeah, that's a tough one. So I'll just start off by saying that, like, Demi Moore, I know she's very decorated. I think she's a little bit on the older side, so I didn't particularly like watch a lot of the movies of hers growing up. I think she knocked it out of the park. Even just like the subtle expressions when she was looking in the mirror
Mm-hmm.
really captured the feeling of the scene, and what she was feeling in that moment about just the dissatisfaction with herself, and wanting to change. And yeah, just like reviewing her new self and her old self. That was super powerful. But I gotta say, Margaret Qualley, yeah, she's a new actress, at least to me, and I had never seen her in a movie prior. And I think she absolutely killed that role. So for me, just like every scene, I think she played that character perfectly, even towards the end where she was kind of upset at Elizabeth, eating chicken legs and just like stuffing herself and all that kind of stuff, and how it affected her and her version of herself. It was really good. So
Love it.
I got to give it to Margaret, and props to Demi Moore as well. I thought she did a fantastic job. How about you, man?
Yeah, dude, you took the one that I was gonna say, which was I'm actually gonna go with Demi Moore. I really did love Margaret Qualley. I really enjoyed her performance in regards to like how you said, right? She had this like very energetic and like bubbly kind of a feeling like that every time she was on screen. She always looked like again she like wanted to have a great time. But I'm gonna choose Demi Moore because like again she like I think you called it out, the looks, dude. Sometimes she didn't have to say anything. It's just like the looks that she was giving herself,
Yeah.
like the looks that she would give Harvey whenever, like when they were eating at the beginning of the movie. Like you could just tell like a lot was going on and how frustrated she was. And also how scared she was, like whenever she was like before she injected herself with the substance, like everything about that performance, just she like felt like very almost like vulnerable. And so I really appreciated that because again, it made me put myself in her shoes, right? What if I do get up to that age, right? And you have that chance of like becoming a younger self, like what the hell would you do?
Yep.
And she like struggled back and forth. And so I really enjoyed that kind of conflict in the performance by Demi Moore. So I'm gonna go Elizabeth played by Demi Moore as my favorite performance.
Hey man, I can't argue with that. Yeah, definitely 1A and 1B in my book. And honorary shout out to Dennis Quaid, man. He
Yes.
was a character in that film as Harvey the executive, and man, that's like imprinted in my brain. So got to give props when it's that memorable.
Definitely like an exaggerated executive, but you can definitely tell that like he pulled examples from like there's like people that definitely would act like that, that are
Yeah.
executives for different companies. So like, yes, spot on, dude. Great shout out and an honorable mention to Dennis Quaid. Ryan, I'll move on to favorite scene. If you wouldn't mind, I'll kind of kick this one off because you called out one of the moments that was actually my favorite moment, which is, do you remember when Elizabeth was going to go on a date with the guy that she got a number from, and she's like getting ready,
Yep.
and then before she goes, she looks at the outside of her window and she sees the poster of or the billboard of Sue. And
Yes.
then she keeps going back to the restroom to kind of put on more makeup, make herself look more younger, and she keeps going back and forth, and with eventually her just not going out on the date, and she just like there's just that one moment where she just puts her hands all over her face and like it looks like she's about to scratch and kind of like claw her own face
Yeah.
because of how frustrated and how she just feels like time has just passed her by and that she can't even enjoy her own life. And so that to me, dude, it was it's such a sad moment and a sad scene, but I appreciate it, and that's what made Demi my favorite performance. Is that scene alone? There's no dialogue. She's not saying anything. She's just throwing a performance and looking at herself in the mirror,
Yep.
and it's so heartbreaking. But that was my favorite moment. Unfortunately, it's a sad moment. Again, I'm not saying that I enjoyed that she was sad, but more so how she played that moment like that. It made you connect with her immediately. Like, gosh, you feel so bad for her.
Yeah, dude, it's almost like we watched the movie together because
Yeah,
that's also my favorite scene.
nice.
I think everything that you said times two. She really sold that scene in terms of like the struggle of just like being herself, but like putting on that makeup made her seem like she was Sue, and maybe she didn't see at that point Sue being herself as a totally different person at that point. So I think it was a pivotal moment in the movie where she realized that maybe she should accept who she is, but she never got to that point. And I think that's the hope that all the viewers were looking for is like maybe just accepting herself. But she's gotten herself into this deep hole and this cycle where she can't get out of, or she did have the option to get out of, truthfully, but she could not get to the point where she felt comfortable completely letting go of that dream and accepting her current reality. And it just got progressively worse and worse. I think, man, the scenes where Elizabeth was kind of in like not fully like in the human centipede blob looking thing phase, where she was kind of in between and she was losing her hair and she was like almost looking like an old witch. Uh,
Yeah.
that that was powerful, man. Her leg was like the only part that was like super deformed, and she was like struggling to get anywhere. Man, those scenes are like imprinted in my mind.
Yeah.
And I thought it was very eerie, it was very eerie scenes. But yeah, I mean that scene was a huge turning point in the movie, and I think is why it's like also my favorite scene. So
I love it, dude. You just reminded me of when she had that deformed leg and she was sitting on the chair and then she had to crack her own knee just to
Oh
get
yeah.
up. I was like, oh my goodness. It's just some gnarly stuff. Well, Ryan, I'll let you kind of finish it off with some of our favorite stuff, dude. What was your favorite shot or your favorite frame? How I like to always describe this one is like if you could have like a screensaver or if you could have a poster of this kind of movie, what would that one shot be? Considering that there's a lot of grotesque and very body horror stuff in this one, there might not be a lot, but what about you, Ryan? What is that one shot that you really enjoyed of this film?
Ooh, yeah, man. So I don't know if this is the actual poster or not. I would imagine like they probably have one poster out here that's like this, but one poster is like when like Elizabeth is sitting down on the couch and she's in the dark and she's watching the late night talk show that Sue is on.
Yep.
Uh, I think that would be a great poster just because it kind of really shows like what the movie is about. Assuming that you knew that they were both kind of the same person and she was going through this. I don't know if there's a scene with like her portrait of her older self in the background, but dude, that is a powerful scene. The fact that the billboard that she sees right outside her window from her skyrise building is, clearly visible, and she always has in front of her like a picture of what could be, right? And
Hmm.
if she continues down the path of, or that continues down that cycle, she'll be able to continue to have the success in her late career, assuming that she still feels like that's still her, which goes back to what we were talking about earlier. But to me, I think that encapsulates what the movie is about, and I think would be make an awesome poster.
Love it, dude. Love the way that you broke that one down too, like of how it even connects to the theme too.
Yeah.
Dude, this is why I have you on, bro. Um, dude, if I could give you my favorite shot, do you remember the scene when like she's starting to kind of transform? Elizabeth is. She has like her finger starting to kind of get very like old. She's starting to going into the stages of like turning into the witch, and she has that like knee that's like just completely deformed and messed up. Do you remember the scene where she's in the shower and she's like basically breaking down?
Mm,
And there's like a shot where like the camera goes up and like it almost feels like her shower is like never ending and she's just laying on the shower like just
yeah.
like feeling so sad and like so like what am I going to do, like how am I going to, even if I stop this drug, I'm still deformed, like I can't go back.
Right.
And so there was, I don't know, something about that shot when when the camera went up and you could just see her laying on the shower like just, again feeling kind of like vulnerable and like she's exposed. Something about that shot was like, oh man, again, putting her in a specific position where like, and I hope that this doesn't sound like I just, again, I called out like my favorite scene was when she was sad or when she's vulnerable. I don't want it to make it sound that way. I just really like that shot because I wasn't expecting the camera to go like up and it just shows you like the shower just never ends. And you're just seeing her like again exposed in the shower, not knowing what to do next. And she's just, slowly transforming into something that she was not expecting because she couldn't accept herself. So I don't know. That was my favorite shot.
That's a really good one because I think for a lot of people, right, when you take a shower, it's I don't know about you guys, but I definitely reflect a lot in the shower.
Yeah.
And as a matter of fact, there's a whole subreddit called shower thoughts. You know what I mean? Where people just
Yep.
post random thoughts that they have. And yeah, man, I think it's a very powerful scene to show her in the shower and just like you said, just showing her emotions and how much despair she had and how conflicted she was throughout the entire film. But like there was a point where she realized there's a point of no return, and that's definitely one of those scenes. And it just progressively got worse and worse from there to the point where it climaxed, and we got the ending that we did. But yeah, man, I'm with you on that. That's a good one.
Dude, I loved it, man. Again, it's so many awesome shots, so many different types of scenery, and like you mentioned before, the cinematography was like again on point. There's so many things that catches your eye when you're watching this movie. So I'm pretty sure you guys will, everybody listening will have other ones as well. But again, that'll be mine. Ryan, before we wrap this up, dude, we've already recommended it. We've dissected our thoughts, our pros and cons about the substance. Let's finish it off, man. Let's go into the last piece, which is this movie timeless? Can you see yourself rewatching The Substance over and over and over again, and it becomes a timeless movie for you, in your opinion? For folks that are listening for the first time, again, timeless could be many things, right? Timeless, in my perspective, is a movie that again I can add to my collection, and I can watch every year, every other year. I'll give you some examples. Interstellar is one of those movies. Jurassic Park, The Dark Knight. Those are movies that I can just literally put on at any moment in time and just enjoy it like it's the first time I'm watching it. So, Ryan, you're the guest man. Kick us off, dude. Is The Substance a timeless movie in your opinion?
So I think our definitions of timeless are definitely different. I am not as avid of a movie watcher as you are, and I'm very selective about movies that I do watch, and I'm even more selective about movies that I'll watch a second time. And I think that for me, that's kind of that criteria. Like, rather, is it timeless? Is it, would I watch it again? And for me, for this movie, it's a yes. It's a yes. I think I would definitely watch this again. Maybe not like a year from now, but maybe 2 to 3 years from now, when I've forgotten about most of the scenes. And I think what holds this movie together is the great acting and the cinematography. And I think it's a movie that will stand the test of time for sure, because it's pretty unique in that there isn't really or hasn't really been a ton of horror films that have explored these themes before that have been that relatable. And yeah, man, I definitely think that, in my opinion, it's definitely something I would rewatch. So in my definition of timeless, I would say this fits the bill. How about you?
Nice, dude. This is gonna be fun because I'm gonna be on the other side, dude. I'm gonna say that the substance is not timeless in my opinion and in my definition of it.
Mm,
Um, because like when I kind of think about it, nobody's right or wrong, right? Everybody has their own kind of definition of like what would you would want to rewatch. Ryan, you've told me in the past, right? Like for you, it takes a lot more energy to like rewatch a movie, right? Especially like if you want to, it's got to be something that really pushes you to a point of like, damn, like I can't wait to watch this again, or you had such great memories, and
yeah.
so yeah, like again, to me, I really enjoyed this experience. I had a fun time. The one item that I keep thinking about is my con is if I wanted to rewatch this movie, I just keep thinking back to that scene in the third act where there's blood and there's just everything's going on with this monster. It just kind of brings me down of like, well, what? Well, why did this scene be? What does this add? What does this make me? It already makes me feel like, I got to get through the movie and I got to get through this specific scene for the ending. So
Yeah,
that's kind of what's keeping it from me being like a timeless movie that I would want to rewatch. Now,
that's fair.
like Ryan mentioned, if like let's say a friend wanted to watch it, right? Or I can already picture it like during Halloween, right? This seems like a movie that like, during that kind of spooky season, like it's a perfect one that you could kind of watch and kind of be scared or freak out some people that are watching it with you with all the body horror. But again, for me, in my opinion, that's the one piece of it that like that third act, for some reason just kind of pulls me out of it, and it sucks. But that in no way means that I hate the movie. I still really enjoy it. I would still recommend it. It's just not going to enter my timeless collection of movies at this moment. So, what do you feel about that, Ryan? That's really our first kind of big kind of difference that we've had up to this point.
That's fair, man. That's fair. That's fair. You heard him, folks. It's not timeless according to Victor Vasquez. But yeah, on a serious note, I'm curious, man. Has there been a horror film that has been timeless that you've watched?
Ooh, that is a great question, dude. I would have to say that so far since I've been doing the podcast, there hasn't been a horror movie. I mean, if you consider Alien Romulus a horror movie, I would say that has probably been the most recent one.
Ooh, okay, okay.
I don't know if you would consider Romulus like a scary or horror movie.
Yeah, for sure.
It has those kind of feelings of it, but that would be like the most recent one. There's a couple that have been close though. I don't know if you ever got to see Late Night with the Devil. I remember
Yes.
I recommend that one to you. Yeah, that one was so close, dude. And I think if I think back to it, I think that one would be a timeless movie because I thought it was so unique and so different.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's good. That's good to know. Yeah, I was just curious, if the genre itself, would not kind of put it in that category, but that's fair, man. That's fair. Yeah, I think all the other movies you pointed out, are definitely kind of a step above, but I'm with you.
Love it, dude. What about you, Ryan? Any other kind of horror movies that you feel like you can rewatch at any point in time?
Ooh, I mentioned this in my intro, but I'm a huge fan of Blumhouse and mostly everything
Yes.
that Blumhouse creates. I mean, the quality of their movies has sort of gone down in recent times, and they're pretty prolific. They release so many movies throughout the year, and not all of them are great, but some of the standout ones, Insidious, I could rewatch
Oh,
so many
yes.
times. I mean, there's just a huge variety of scares that I really appreciate, and kind of there's like a quirkiness to that movie that I really like.
Yeah.
Um, and the Conjuring series, definitely love the Conjuring series, and all of Jordan Peele's films. I know his most, Get Out was definitely horror related. I love that movie. I could definitely rewatch that. Yeah, there's a couple, man. There's definitely a couple out there on my list.
Dude, I love that, man. It's gonna be really fun to see what other horror movies, like how they can kind of like at least up the ante and kind of be different. Again, I would love more like this, right? Like The Substance, that are just out there, wacky. Hopefully they don't have third acts like the one that I saw in The Substance. But again, that's what's fun about watching these movies. But Ryan, I can't thank you enough, man. You pointed out some awesome stuff, the themes about this movie. I really hope that you had a good time, and I really would love to have you back on the podcast, man.
Dude, I had a great time. Thank you for having me as a guest. And please, to everyone out there that's listening, like and subscribe to my boy here. He works hard on this podcast, and he's gonna be successful one day. So do it while you still can.
Yeah, appreciate you, Ryan. Well, everybody, that has been our episode on The Substance. This has been episode number 106 of the Timeless Movie Podcast. It has been Ryan Saw and Victor Vasquez. Make sure to check out next week's episode as we cover a new movie that we got to check out in theaters or streaming. I know that this is more of a catch-up episode of a movie of 2024, but next week we're going to be talking about a new movie from 2025 already. So make sure to tune in. Thanks so much again for Ryan for joining us. All right, everybody. Have a great rest of your week, and I'll talk to you guys later.